Today we've got a crazy revenge story against somebody that goes around accusing people wrongly. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, I made my friends leave bad reviews on my roommate's business website. When I was in my early 20s, I had a group of friends that we went to college with. We all lived in the same neighborhood and hung out together regularly. It was like a Friends, the TV show situation. 2 of the people in my group were married, and the other 3 were 2 guys and a girl. Both men were nerdy, and the girl was married to a millionaire who was way older than all of us. She married him in college. Like Monica and Friends, the group always hung out in my house. It made sense because I inherited my home from my grandmother, and it was bigger than the houses of the others. Save for the millionaire's wife's friend, of course. My house was spacious, and I was a good host too. I would bake and cook for them, and they loved coming to my home for meals. I'd always wanted to be a chef or something, but I feared that if I made a career out of it, it would ruin the fun of cooking for me. So I stuck to my career as an accountant and only cooked for my friends and family members. I was working at an accounting and auditing firm where we worked as personal accountants for wealthy people, amongst others. And it was at work that I met my new friend, let's call her X. I met X the first day she resumed at the office. She was at the front desk looking like a lost puppy. I knew she had questions about directions and all that, so I walked up to her and asked her to ask me for help. She asked for our boss's office and I pointed it to her. I shook my head as she went along to find her way because my boss would eat her. My boss was a complete meanie and hated to see people looking nervous. Truly, when I saw X leaving my boss's office, she looked like she'd seen a ghost. I asked her if she was okay and she nodded, but she still looked very worried. She had just been offered a job and she needed a place to stay. I left her at the front desk and returned to chatting with my work bestie. I watched X make different calls and looked disappointed after, and I immediately figured out what was going on. I was in her shoes when I moved to a new city after college to get a fresh start. I got a great job, but I had nowhere to live, and rent was very expensive in that part of the world. It was expensive to rent an apartment and hard to even find one. I had to give the job up and move back to the city my friends lived in, where I was when the whole fiasco happened. I felt bad for the newbie and asked if she'd gotten a place. She said her cousin said she couldn't stay because her fiancé moved in with her. When I asked her if she'd had another option, she said she would stay in a hotel until she could find a place to rent. Renting a place in that city was hard and it could take months to find a suitable place, especially for someone who didn't make a lot of money. I offered my apartment for her to stay in. It was large anyway, so she could stay in my guest room. I invited X into my home, and for the first month, we were like sisters. People at work thought we'd known each other before she was employed there. That was how close we were. Naturally, she met all of my friends and somewhat became a part of the group. The thing about X is that she would smile to your face and make you think she loves you more than anyone else ever can, but she would badmouth you behind your back and try to make people hate you. That was what she did with my friends and I. She started to badmouth me to my friends, especially the married couple. The couple and I had a history of sorts, and that was what she latched on. When we were in college, the girl broke up with the guy and he was quite upset about it. She broke up with her boyfriend and started to spend less time with the group. It was a difficult time for us in the group because we were confused as to whom to support. Some months passed and the guy asked me out. It was weird, of course, because he was my friend's ex and he was also my friend. But the others in the group encouraged it because the guy was broken when she left. We went out for 2 months and then they got back together. I was pissed and felt used, and for 2 years, my relationship with the couple sucked. It wasn't until I moved into the house I got for my aunt and started hosting them that I started warming up towards them. I thought I could trust X, so I told her about all that happened, and whenever I needed someone to rant to, I would talk to her. I didn't know that X had been visiting the couple in their home and telling them the things I said about them. She didn't just tell them what I told her, she lied about too many things too, including telling them that I said the things that she said. For instance, she told the couple that I said the girl was abusive in their relationship, but she actually said that. She also told the millionaire's wife that I said something about her husband being a cradle snatcher, and then went on to lie that I told her that she, the millionaire's wife, was cheating on her husband. The lies were just too crazy. She told everyone in our group something bad that I'd said about them, and these were usually comments that she'd made about them. I even used to feel guilty that I'd sometimes listen to her make weird comments about my friends, but she always disguised her nasty comments as concern or curiosity. She's also a very cunning person, so she always managed to badmouth and lie against me in a way that my friends wouldn't exactly notice that she was doing it. Soon enough, she got into their heads and they started to avoid me. My friends would come to my house, and if she wasn't in, they would either keep to themselves and ignore me, or they would just leave and return when she's back. I also noticed that they started to avoid eating my meals or even hanging out at my place. She told them that I called them leeches and complained that they were always eating my food. She also warned the couple not to eat my food and said I was so mad at them that I could poison their food. She was that ridiculous, and these people who were supposed to be my friends ate it up. When I found out about all that she'd been saying to my friends behind my back, I angrily confronted them. I was mad at my friends because they knew me, or at least should. They'd known me for a long time and they should have known better, or at least come to me with what they heard. We were so angry, and after talking for a while, we realized why she was trying to sabotage me in the group. She enjoyed hosting the same way I did and wished she had a house like mine and friends like mine. That was the only plausible explanation for her behavior. Meanwhile, at that time, she'd been fired at the office for 2 weeks. She and my boss argued and she was fired. She claimed she was happy regardless because she wasn't fulfilled at the job and now needed to pursue her dreams. X rented a place, had it specially furnished, and said she was going to sublet it out as an Airbnb. We all told her it was a good idea, but I'd planned with my friends to sabotage her business. She spent all her savings on buying furniture for the apartment. Bed sheets and electronic gadgets. She wanted the place to be perfect, and she was just certain that she would make a lot of money from it. We were certain that we would never let her. We went all out for her, especially us girls, going with her to the store to buy stuff for her business and to make everything ready. But that was all just a ploy to make her trust us enough to let us in. After she'd set up the entire place, we went to her online website and left negative reviews all over. We left so many negative reviews that she broke down completely. She didn't know we were responsible for it, so she came to us to rant and cry. We didn't tell her until 2 weeks after the bad review thing happened. She genuinely thought it was one of her competitors who saw the potential in her business and wanted to sabotage it. You know what's really funny? We made sure she had serious doubts about her business. Whenever she came to us complaining about the bad reviews, we would ask if she was sure about the whole thing and whether she thought they were right. That made her lose all the confidence she had in her being a host. When we told her that we were unto her, she was embarrassed. She tried to apologize, but we were not having it. I threw her out of my house. My friends and I are no longer friends because at some point, everyone just went their own way, and the group grew apart after the couple sort of cut everyone off. But I'm super glad that I got them to torment X. Well, I guess it might have started off like a Friends TV show situation, but it sounds to me like they're not going to make it to syndication. Sorry, OP, no billion-dollar Netflix reruns. Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy crazy stories of revenge, it would be amazing if you left a like or left a review if you're listening to my podcast. That said, our next story is, my brother got what he rightfully deserved, and I gave it to him. Growing up, I got to know and learn from my folks that when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. But then people have failed to realize that life doesn't actually give lemons, and the truth still remains that lemons are a result of human intervention and crossbreeding actions. That aside, it still doesn't change the fact that when life presents an opportunity, it is advised to make the best use of it. But no one prepares you for the event or situation where said opportunity, or in this case, person, which was yours, gets stolen or taken over by someone who knows very much so how this means to you, for personal benefits and gain, but majorly attributed to the fact that this was just come out of spite and pure deep-rooted hatred. Mine is a story of brotherly betrayal and, in a way, how I was able to put aside various thought processes and differences that actually existed between us, and majorly things that were seeming like they were going to be a hindrance in my quest for vengeance. My brother, male 26, and I, 27, were the only children of both of my parents for quite a long time. The reason for this could be seen in the fact that both our parents were not bothered in the slightest to even get more children. You might be wondering why this might be so. Well, I can say for a fact that this was definitely their plan from the get-go. My father, being a very traditional man, had always wanted a son. And when he got my brother, about 6 years after his getting married to my mother, he was satisfied. Only halfway. He wanted just one more child, be it a female or a male. He would accept anyone at this point, and that was what he did. As when I came into the world only a year after my brother, he was as celebratory as he was when he welcomed my brother. As my mother had always said, I was my father's favorite child for some reason, even though I was his second son and basically my brother at the time was doing everything that he could in order to stay in my father's good graces. Myself, on the other hand, had quite literally little to nothing to do as regards that. I couldn't even have been bothered by the fact, seeing as I was the one receiving most of the attention. From both parents too, I might add. Anyways, this was basically how my family was set up right from the very beginning, and for quite a while too. Moving on, I'd like to give a little introduction and background on and about my family. My father, who was a successful, well-made man, and a wealthy one at that too, was one of the largest shareholders in some major companies around the country, and even internationally. He didn't really fancy the idea of making everything in life about money. And also, he didn't really think that the money that he was making and accumulating over the course of his entire life was not for himself, but rather for his children and their children's children. He quite literally accumulated generational wealth. And this was one of the things that really made me look up to my father. He was my role model for the entirety of my life growing up. Moving on, he had some major strict policies about his business and family, most of which my brother and I got to find out only later on when we were both already grown, and at the age where we were expected to have developed a sense of responsibility because my father believed that there was nothing to teach a male child if he could not learn the basis of responsibility on his own. And in my family's case, the term responsibility always referred to financial responsibility, which was kind of an obvious guess when I was 15. But then I wasn't yet privy to certain information at the time, and this left me in the dark for a while about some things. But my brother, on the other hand, had the advantage, and got to find out something way before I even had the chance. But this still didn't tip the scales in his favor. Following the events that transpired between my brother and I that apparently caused, or rather created, bad blood between the both of us, I fully resolved myself not to be the other guy that gets to regret not taking any action when necessary, or the other guy that gets trampled on and can apparently do nothing about it. Well, it all started when we both were sent by our father to a different country for our international studies, as he always made a point about the fact that both his sons were going to get every attainable degree, as this was something he couldn't do while he was growing up, and I'm thankful to have a father like him. Anyways, he sent both my brother and myself to college at one of the top schools in the world, and it was there that we both had to learn quite a lot of things on my end of responsibilities and all, but that wasn't the case for my brother, as even though he was the eldest of the two of us, this didn't change the fact that he was quite the miscreant. Well, that might be a strong word to use, but then again, it's the truth, as I didn't view him as anything less than that. He was always in trouble with the school's authority, and every single time he always made use of our father's money to get out of any situation he found himself in. He was of the belief that money could solve quite literally any problem that he had. And even though he never had enough and always had to come and take some from me, his ideology and perspective on life didn't change. And I wasn't surprised. I guess this was just how he truly was, and there was nothing I could have done actively to change him, and so I didn't even bother. But the one thing that I couldn't stand for was the fact that ultimately, when my father decided to split his assets, properties, and finances between the both of us, he was going to get his fair share. And this really bothered me, and there seemed like nothing I could do about it. But then again, the one thing I had in my control was the fact that I could stop letting him take my own allowance for the month, which was very large thanks to our mother also chipping in some for me and nothing for him, as she knew the kind of behavior that he had. And she wasn't willing or ready even in the slightest to give him anything. Anyways, after I had decided on what I was going to do, I stuck by that, as I was totally determined to make him understand the consequences of his actions. And so, after every reckless spending he had done, whenever he came to me for a share of my own allowance, I would always turn him down. And I'm sure this upset him greatly, as after a couple of times of trying to get something out of me, he wasn't able to do so. Little did I know that he already had something in store for me. Anyways, after quite a few attempts, he didn't bother me about that again. But he did something else that really ticked me off, and I had to get back at him where he would feel it the most. So when we both were in our finals, there was this girl that I'd always been with, Not together in a relationship, but then we'd been together since I was in my second year and we really hit things off as friends. And we helped each other out whenever either one of us found ourselves in need. But recently, I had realized that the feeling of friendship between the both of us was so strong, so much so, that one couldn't call this friendship anymore, as it was already more than that. Anyways, to cut the long story short, we both realized we had feelings for each other and we decided to take things to the next level, and we mutually got into a relationship with each other. Somehow, news of this got to my brother's ears and he wasn't having it. So what he chose to do was make sure that things didn't work out between us. At first, he was without harm, trying to woo her, and on several occasions, she'd always been turning him down, and this was something that he wasn't having apparently, as he couldn't understand why she wasn't giving him the time of her day. And when he'd gotten tired of the wild goose chase that he'd set himself on, he decided to take extreme measures by stalking her occasionally and eventually threatening her into submission and accepting him. Until one day she had no choice but to give in to his demands, and she ultimately ended things with me after just 12 weeks of being together, officially in a relationship. She didn't give a reason as to why though. I simply just thought this was how she truly was. And this was how she wanted to treat our friendship from that moment onwards. My ideology soon changed as I saw her with my brother one day, and I'm guessing he acted in a different way with her than when he saw me, almost as if to rub it in my face and all. He had claimed his supposed prize. When I saw them together, I instantly understood what had happened, and by the look on her face, it only affirmed my suspicions all the more. I knew what he had done, and at the time I didn't know what to do. But the only thing I did know was the fact that my chance to get back at him would come, and I would savor the moment greatly. And thankfully, my chance came sooner than expected, as when we were both done with our studies, my father called us back home, as he'd already chosen one of us to succeed him and inherit all of his properties and assets, basically taking his place. He chose not to divvy it, as he believed that only one person should be in charge, as only one person can be said to have properly understood true responsibility, and you can guess who that person was. When we got home, my father announced to us the very next day that he had chosen his successor, and I guess he had his hopes up as he was of the idea that this was his birthright. Little did he know that there were other criteria other than being born first. My father named me his heir and successor, and this filled his eyes with pure rage. He tried to question my father on his decision, but there was nothing he could have said or done. My father simply had a stare down with him, and when my brother realized that my father was already very much aware of his antics, he suddenly went pale. Well, seeing as I was the one that brought every bit of information my father had on him to his knowledge, I was having the time of my life. This was the moment I was waiting for, the moment where I would take everything from him, basically leaving him with nothing. And then he quite literally came crawling to me, begging and pleasing for my supposed forgiveness. The look on his face was enough satisfaction for me, but he was still going to get nothing from me, and no one was going to change their mind, not even my parents. But it's not like they were planning on doing so, as they were already on my side from the beginning. I mean, if this guy had any money, he sounds like sadly the perfect candidate to try to take this completely legal, try to issue some kind of claim to the inheritance. I was the firstborn, therefore I deserve it. Lawyer up and just try to milk your inheritance just out of court costs. Our next story is, you don't accuse people wrongly and get away with it. People claim that the craziest experiences you can ever have in your life come from your time in college. I didn't always agree with this, but all it took for me to see the real world and how people can be real terrible humans was one event. And every time I look back to that event, I just shake my head, thankful that it's all in the past. A thing we can laugh about now. At least some of the key players in the story can be laughed about. So back in college, there was this dormitory I lived in. It was a mixed kind of dormitory for some reason that only the school understood. I guess they thought of every student as mature enough to not try anything funny, or at least they expected us to be decent about whatever carnal activities we would engage in. So, mixed dormitory. Each room was gendered such that you could not have the opposite gender as a roommate. I lived in the dorm with my roommate Harper. Given the population of the dorm, it was always filled with excitement and chatter, like a beehive buzzing with gossip and drama. There was always one new thing for students to talk and fuzz about through the week, or till something bigger and better came to the limelight. But I did not live alone with Harper. Allison was our third roommate. She was sweet to an extent, but I always felt she was kind of cold. Something about her did not just agree with me in a way. I like to think that it was how you could never really guess what she was thinking. From where I was standing, she was always plotting something in her head, waiting and baiting time till someone fell into her plot, and then there was no way to beat her at her game since she had just thought of the possible scenarios even before the issue started. It was just wrong to me. Every other room had a similar living structure, 3 roommates. Below our block was the other male block, and there was Jackson. Jackson was the handsome heartthrob of the dorm. With his easy smile and confident demeanor, he was the center of attention wherever he went. Not just girls, but even the guys too. He was like those guys you meet in high school who didn't have to do much to be sought after by literally everyone in the school. Call him the most sought after bachelor, if you will. Like most guys that babes tend to flock around, he had this standard they all seemed to meet for him to be associated with them in any way. It's something like a spec, if you call it that. More than once, he was the subject of the gossip flying around the dorm, girls witching on each other or coming at him for something, endless live reality TV drama. Usually this drama used to be far from me. I mean, I was kind of the quiet one. I faded into the background most times. It wasn't that I was antisocial or anything, I just happened to like listening or watching rather than being the active character in these stories. This way, most people didn't even know me. I was all about my business and watching from the sidelines. But more importantly, the drama that traveled about never really got to my room. And then, suddenly, it did. I'm sure you can already take a guess at who must have brought the drama: Allison. Everything was well until one day, Allison decided to set her eyes on Jackson. Maybe if she had been open to letting her roommates know of the things she thinks when she thinks them, Harper might have been able to convince her that it was a bad idea. But typical Allison, she did not. She got all in his face, offering to do one thing or the other for him. You could see her totally fawning over him, merely watching her talk to him. I guess she thought she could wear him down without actually having to say what she felt about him, but Jackson wasn't that kind of person. He would always wait for the girls who threw themselves over him to state their case plainly with their words. At long last, after 2 horrible weeks of watching Allison embarrass herself, she spoke to him in the laundry room. It wasn't that I was stalking either of them. The drama between them just happened to almost always be in my presence, and this day was not any different. Allison finally had the courage to speak with her words, and when she did, Jackson let out a small laugh before he replied to her. The rejection centered around her being not his type, being too clingy, and asking her to give herself some respect because she's not too bad. It was the first time I've seen Jackson reject someone firsthand. I could now understand how deep the hurt went. As the rejection settled in, I could see a fire burning in Allison's eyes. It was a different kind of hurt, but there was nothing she could do about it other than feel anger coursing through her veins and embarrassment for the things he said. Or so I thought. It turned out that she allowed that one small act of youthful mischief to make her become something I could not have imagined when I first met her. I could understand being sad and deciding to act out in that sadness, but like I said, that wasn't the way Allison operated. She concocted plans in her head and finished the whole play in her head before beginning her scene. And from her first action, the whole thing just became a downhill spiral. To be honest, I felt nothing would come of the rejected advances by Jackson since the news didn't hit the dorm the next day. There was not as much a whisper or a snicker in the hallways that had Allison's name in it. I figured that this was probably because she was smart enough to do it when the laundry room was empty, with the exception of me. So people didn't really know what happened. I thought that was the end of it, but I was wrong. A couple of days had passed and suddenly I picked up on a fresh rumor flying around fast. Somehow, or from somewhere, it started going around that Jackson had been suspended for a week because he harassed someone and tried to force his way with them. I was confused at first, but the initial confusion I had was not up to the confusion I got when the victim's name popped up. It was Allison's. The dorm was first in disbelief, and then others started coming up saying it was possibly true without any evidence to support their claim. You could have guessed who these supporters were. Girls that their names had come up in one rumor with Jackson or the other. I knew Allison could be cruel, but I didn't expect her to make a claim that could literally ruin the course of Jackson's career and life over rejection of sexual advances. It didn't make things better that Jackson himself was nowhere to be found in the initial parts of the week. I couldn't understand what kept him away for that long, but he was. The time he used away from the dorm gave room to the rumors spreading and gaining more roots, and in truth, Allison never came up to say anything physically about Jackson, but the silence made it look like her admission of his wrongdoing. I couldn't say anything because, in truth, it could have happened when I wasn't there. But if it had, I was certain that Allison would have been at the forefront of the rumor. She wouldn't have been silent. This was all I needed to know, that she started the rumor and continued to pretend like she did not know what was going on. This went on till Jackson got back into the dorm, and when he came, he refused to back down without a fight. He knew what was at stake, and he could not let his image or life be tarnished by it. He reported the case officially to the school authorities and asked that an investigation be carried out because he was innocent of the rumor being passed around. It was a period of hell, and no matter how Allison tried to feign ignorance of the whole situation, it was impossible to remove the accusing fingers pointed at her. In my mind, at least, it made no sense that she would approach Jackson. He turns her down, albeit with a sly remark, like almost every other guy out there, and after he leaves to take care of personal business, a rumor begins to fly around that he harassed you. The investigation by the school did not yield anything productive, and in the end, it was dropped since Allison herself said he did nothing of such to her. The coincidence was way too coincidental to be a real coincidence. I thought so, and apparently, so did Jackson. By the time the whole thing was done, the period of exam finals and cumulative grading was near, and this was when Jackson walked up to me in the laundry room. That evening, I went to get my laundry done, and while I was waiting for the first machine to be done, he came to me and said I was complicit in the trash that Allison did. First, I was shocked that he knew I was in a way related to Allison, and when I tried to argue with him, he reminded me of the day Allison came to him in that very laundry room where he turned her down and told me that I was in the room, and I could have said something when the rumor started moving around. To an extent, I agreed with him. I could have said something, but there was no point because I wasn't sure anyone would have listened to what I had to say. I was no one. He told me he wanted to get back at Allison, and I offered to help if there was anything I could do. This was when he told me of the classes that they take together. He knew they had assignments to turn in for the classes. His decision was to tamper with her coursework. I had no idea what the assignment was about, so all I had to do was find a way to get her login details to the school's website. That part was easy to do because we stayed in the same room, and she would not suspect that I had anything to do with her courses. Once I had them, I gave them to Jackson, and he told me that he had made plagiarized copies of the essay they were asked to write for 2 classes. The essays took just 30% of the total coursework, but the problem was plagiarism. The school had a high disgust for plagiarized work, so much so that the repercussion for first-time offenders was that they fail the course automatically. For repeated offenders, they were either suspended or expelled depending on the gravity of the plagiarized work. I knew she would fail the courses if she didn't notice early and delete the ones that was submitted by Jackson. Unfortunately, she did not. I could not say whether it was karma that made her realize that she wasn't the one who submitted the first one, or whether it was just a repercussion of her laziness. Whichever the case was, the fact that she did not pull the essays that Jackson submitted on her behalf was justice finally getting to her. And I was glad I could play my part in her getting what she deserved. Would most of you agree that OP is a major part of the problem here? I feel like OP went about this all the wrong way because when Jackson confronted OP and they said, "Why didn't you say anything?" OP immediately assumes it's gotta be about like the rumor mill and talking to people around the dorm as if they gotta go knocking door to door and telling people, "Hey, I was in the laundry room when this happened and nothing happened." And not the fact that OP probably should have seen this gone down, went to some kind of school authority, say that there's this rumor going around about this assault, and that OP was standing there and witnessed them and nothing happened. And then let the powers that be actually try to handle it. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another crazy revenge story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.